Man, DMC, can you believe another year has gone by already? Hashtag too fast. Hashtag summertime.
Hashtag IKR. Hashtag true dat. Hashtag ton of fun. Hashtag crazy busy. Hashtag insane.
Where does the time go? Hashtag TikTok.
Seems like only yesterday we were welcoming the 6th grade kids on the first day. Hashtag standing ovation. Hashtag little ones. Hashtag I can't find my class.
Hashtag I can't open my locker.
Hashtag Mr. Burke is scary.
Hashtag maybe sometimes.
How about the work Stuco did this year? Hashtag 40K for charity. Hashtag Madam Blay. Hashtag Mr. G.
Hashtag Mr. Golf. Hashtag Mr. Gone. Hashtag gonna miss Mr. G.
Hashtag retired.
How about Spirit Week? Hashtag Wacky Talkie. Hashtag doing math in my PJs. Hashtag orangutan victorious.
Hashtag first time in 9 years. But you know what I can't get enough of?
Hashtag testing.
You know it. Hashtag ISA, hashtag map, hashtag number 2 pencils only.
Hashtag map again. Hashtag and again. Hashtag smart kids though.
Don't forget the fun stuff either. Hashtag activities.
Hashtag sports. Hashtag clubs. Hashtag community service. Hashtag music.
Hashtag medals. Hashtag Isaac champions. Hashtag foodie to man. You know what I love though more than anything, Ev?
Hashtag preach it.
Hashtag middle school parties. Hashtag chaperoning. Hashtag loud music. Hashtag crazy kids. Hashtag 120 people all singing karaoke at once. Hashtag pump it up.
Hashtag Pretty pumps it up. Hashtag adios amigo.
Hashtag bye con Dios.
I love to play this year. Hashtag no place like home. Hashtag everyone gets apart. Hashtag great message.
Hashtag only new for a day. Hashtag go Miss Casey. Hashtag no child left behind.
How about all those raised by the kids for St. Baldrick's in Quincy? Hashtag Miss and Miss Dante. Hashtag tough girl Quincy.
Hashtag Quincy Q we love you. Hashtag fighter. Hashtag caring community.
And that's so true. Hashtag chin refugees. Hashtag shoes donated. Hashtag gift drive. Hashtag ho ho ho.
Hashtag ho ho helping others. Hashtag true meaning of Christmas.
Hashtag giving is the gift.
And you know, I'm loving the arts this year. Hashtag jazz band, hashtag a me orchestra, hashtag a me choir, hashtag a me band, hashtag ISTA, hashtag SEA choir, hashtag SEA orchestra, hashtag ISCAL choral exchange, hashtag Odyssey.
Hashtag got the picture.
Hashtag strings.
Hashtag Morello on the cello. Hashtag no more Morello.
Hashtag great teacher. Hashtag program built from scratch. Hashtag missing Morello already.
Hashtag missing Morello already.
Word.
And remember, Jack Gantos, hashtag New Beer Award winner.
Hashtag great stories. Hashtag funny man. Hashtag little bit crazy.
Speaking of crazy, do you have the connections to get involved in food tech? Hashtag kids with knives. Hashtag kids in the kitchen.
Hashtag cooking with the kids. Hashtag a Miss Alex Smith invention. Hashtag no haggis.
Hashtag gone fishing. Hashtag 14 years at IceCal. Hashtag best wishes.
Hashtag off to the island. And a shout out to P. Peterson and J. Murphy. Hashtag stepping up. Hashtag stepping in. Hashtag stepping out.
And what about the Malaysia week? Before we left, the kids were all like, hashtag I want to change my site. Hashtag I want to be with my friends.
Yeah, but when we get back, you know, they're all like, hashtag awesome. Hashtag I love leeches. Hashtag I made new friends. And we finished off with that great dance show. Hashtag tequila. Hashtag awesome.
Don't forget those assemblies all year long too. Hashtag brave kids. Hashtag talent. Hashtag
be safe out there. Hey, are you as excited for the new campus as I am? Hashtag supersize me.
Looking forward to it, but I love this place too. Hashtag this place is cozy.
Yeah, it's about the kids and not about the building. Hashtag feels like home.
Hashtag home. Hashtag Alaska. Hashtag summer. Hashtag out of here.
Hashtag daylight all night. Hashtag midnight sun. Hashtag makes me happy.
Hey, what are you guys doing in here? Get out of here. Hashtag have a good summer. Hashtag I got work to do. Hashtag get out.
Hashtag
fascinating the word hashtag. It is a compound word made up of 2 elements. The free-base element hash, which does come from an Old French origin, meaning hatchet, same origin as hatchet, Old French hasher, possibly from a Proto-Germanic root. As for tag, equally fascinating, coming from possibly Scandinavian, going way back, but later in the 1990s it takes on a denotation of graffiti. Fascinating words, compound, Germanic, Proto-Germanic roots.
Hashtag
Sing!
Hashtag Hashtag love to go fishing.
Hashtag all in a great big fish. Hashtag drinking coffee on my dock by the lake. Hashtag turtle watching.
Hashtag drink cups of tea.
Hashtag I love to travel. Hashtag swimming.
Hashtag bug Miss Snively.
Hashtag sleeping in.
Hashtag cuddle Mr. Foodie.
Hashtag blanket forts. Hashtag travel. Hashtag scuba diving.
Hashtag backpacking.
Hashtag ride my Harley. Hashtag reading.
Hashtag adventure. Hashtag running.
Hashtag sunbathing. Read.
Hashtag tease oopa.
Hashtag diving.
Hashtag reading. Hashtag read.
Hashtag sleep. Hashtag traveling.
Hashtag mountain biking.
Hashtag jumping in the lake. Hashtag cooking.
Hashtag drink coffee.
Hashtag love to play tennis.
Hashtag rafting.
Hashtag eat.
Hashtag gardening.
Hashtag
Love to sleep. Hashtag singing.
Hashtag snorkeling. Hashtag eating.
Hashtag play badminton.
Hashtag hiking in waterfalls. Hashtag reading.
Hashtag dancing. Hashtag playing with my dog.
Hashtag riding bikes.
Hashtag running. Hashtag go to the beach.
Hashtag fishing. Hashtag play in the sky.
Hashtag going hiking.
Hashtag read dictionaries. Look for the etymology of words. Keep wondering. Read morphings, prefixes, suffixes.
Hashtag surfing. But everything I love to do is ride on this wall. Kayaking, mucking around with my dog, climbing up in the mountains, out in my boat, and yoga, looking out to sea. That's what I like to do every day. Gotta do it.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news, talking this and that. Well, give me all you got and don't hold it back. Well, I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine. No offense to you, don't waste your time. Here's why. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Hey, go. Bring me lovers too.